Good morning. I'm Donna Rosenberg from Jameson Legal, and I'm Director and Head of Inhouse for UK and Europe. I'm here today with Mark Jenkins. As you know, we've been doing a series of virtual interviews on the rise of the modern GC, and we've been talking around topics of careers in-house, technology, and a variety of other subjects with senior lawyers who have reached management, executive, or strategic positions, and in Mark's case, leveraging off that experience and going in-house as a consultant. Mark Jenkins is an experienced lawyer and a business leader with a career history in a top US law firm in corporate finance and in-house legal roles. He has a diverse career and is currently using his legal knowledge and expertise in a consulting function, advising a NASDAQ listed company, Mirio BioPharma Group PLC, on a range of commercial and capital market matters. Good morning, Mark. How are you?
I'm really good, thanks, Donna. Hi, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm really well, thank you. Thanks very much for joining and participating.
No, thanks for the invitation. Really appreciate it.
Great. So it would be great, Mark, if we could start off just by hearing a little bit more about your experience and what appealed to you to participate in these interviews.
Sure. Well, if you like, I'll start off why I was intrigued to participate in the interviews, and I think it's just it's a good opportunity, if you like, just to sit back and reflect about the shape of a career and whether or not you're going about things the right way. That kind of led me to think, well, there's probably two basic paths to moving up a legal career. You can choose to specialize, to really get into the detail of something and make that make yourself the go-to person on that on that particular subject, or go broad. And on that kind of choice, I think it's important to be quite authentic, listen to yourself a little bit, follow what you're going to enjoy in your career. And for me, I definitely enjoy variety, learning new things, fairly curious, and I get fairly stuck in a rut. I'm doing the same thing over and over again, and for me that led me to a career which has so far been pretty broad, taking on different things and trying to take advantage of different opportunities as and when they come along.
That's great. And if you were just looking back on your journey and looking at the different things that you've done in your career, what have you found to be the most challenging about your work?
Interesting question. I guess at one level, it's always operating, slightly at the edge of your comfort zone. Always, being confronted with a slightly new situation, maybe a high-profile situation, and maybe you haven't done that before, but you kind of got to use your wits, collaborate with other people. I think that's one of the most important things, and use what experience you've got and try to form sound judgments, because people rely on you in particularly performing a legal position, to exercise some good sound judgment. That means that you don't take elements of risk, or that there are risks involved in taking decisions. But as you go through that career, you hope to build up that judgment a little bit, so that when you get to those challenging situations, you can apply yourself all the more better for it.
And of course, when you're consulting as well, it's not only just risk on behalf of the company, but personal risk as well, because, by taking on new challenges, there's an element of, personal risk that you're taking by investing in, a variety of different companies and how you work within those businesses.
I guess that's right. Yeah. Particularly taking on a consulting mandate, well, it can be very short term. The periods can be very short term. But I tend to find that, particularly with consulting mandates, they're often triggered because, there's a specific situation or a need that has arisen, within a business. And it's quite rewarding to be able to go in and meet that targeted need. And what I found is, quite often in my career as well, is that when you get your feet underneath the table, you start figuring out the lay of the land and what problems there are and what needs solving. Yeah. Quite often you get involved and dragged into all types of different areas at the same time. And, my latest project is a little bit like that. It was only meant to be a month and a half, and I'm there 6 months later. For example, when I started at the cooperative bank, I thought that was a really interesting situation. And it was you could tell that 12 to 18 months down the line, maybe there was going to be a sale of the bank, maybe the bank was going to need to be recapitalized. But I went in to deal with something quite specific. But then, as I said, once you get your feet under the table, you start showing, hopefully, that you're relatively helpful and can, help collaborate and bring teams through these difficult situations. You can end up staying for a little bit longer.
Yeah, it's interesting when we speak to people that wanting to go into consulting roles and use the wealth of experience like you have done yourself by moving into, offering consulting services, how, they feel that there's, some sort of element of risk on the shorter term contracts, only to find out that, like you said, once you get your feet under the desk, it really leads into, if not longer term contracting prospects, but also permanent positions as well. So it could be a really good try before you buy scenario.
Yeah. I'm conscious in talking that it could sound a little bit like, once you get into the system, you start to leech off it. But I honestly don't think it's like that. I think it's more along the lines of once you get into the system, you find that maybe there's multiple problems and you get on with the team and you become part of the team. And over time, as you say, maybe you become permanent or, the contract comes to a natural end. But, for example, at the cooperative bank, I did go permanent. I moved on a number of positions, when I was there. And it was a fantastic experience in the end.
Great, thank you. So if we look back to a time when you were looking to go into Inhouse and what that represented for you, is there anything in particular that triggered the move for you?
At that point in time, I'll be perfectly honest, I needed a job, and it was a great... you do what you do. You utilize the network to some extent. You reach out and you find out what's available. And this is what came up, and it seemed like a really great opportunity for me. It was that was the first time I did contracting, was at the cooperative bank. But slightly beyond that, I guess you talk about going back to what we said before about a little bit about being authentic and listening to yourself. I knew that in my career, I didn't just want to work in private practice. I wanted to work in business and kind of blur the lines a little bit towards being more of a business person at the same time. I think that, this represented to me a good opportunity to get in, to learn a business, to understand it, and to become part of the team. And what I kind of found through various in-house roles is that those who are most successful at performing those in-house roles tend never to be just a lawyer or part of a legal team, but they are as much part of the business as anybody else, and they view the business's problems and the business's strategy as much their business as it is of anybody else in the team. And I enjoy that. I enjoy figuring out how the business works, what that means from a legal point of view, but then translating that back into hopefully how to make the business better.
And how would you sort of, what comments would you have around anybody that's being a little bit more specific about a roadmap or, some sort of plan when it comes to going in-house today? Do you think it's not so much about the roadmap, but about seeing the road to opportunity, I guess?
I think so. To some extent in life, you do have to play the cards as you find them, and with quite a lot of luck involved. But it's a really interesting question. I think a roadmap is something which can be very helpful to ground yourself, to give yourself a plan. It's always it's reassuring, and it feels good to know that you've thought about maybe a couple of steps ahead and what it might look like and how you might get there. On the flip side, I think it's probably really important not to restrict yourself to that. And because you might find that those opportunities never arrive. You find yourself waiting around for this specific event in the roadmap, and it just doesn't materialize. And so it's important to be, I think, really open-minded to opportunities. And so that when they do come along, those slightly broader range of opportunities, you analyze them with a mindset of, how can this contribute to a few steps in my career? And as opposed to does it fit within my pre-existing roadmap?
That makes sense. With respect to risk, what do you feel is really key to understanding this?
Risk? Interesting. It's, having worked in a couple of financial institutions, it's a subject matter that can result in, kind of rolling of the eyeballs a little bit, because people associate it with, risk self-assessments, checklists, fairly banal process.
Mm-hmm.
I think just like with translating law and legal practice into business, risk is a little bit the same, in that you have to kind of figure out why it adds value, why it can be interesting for people, and why it's worthwhile to do. And I think key here a little bit with risk is that it's just as much about opportunity and realizing opportunity, grasping it and realizing strategy, as it is as much about managing downside risk. Mm-hmm. Because it's about enabling a business to do something successfully. It's all very well having a strategy, but if you haven't thought out what are the potential things that could go wrong with that, how do we mitigate against that? Your chances of achieving that strategy are much reduced. And therefore, it becomes a very worthwhile activity once you kind of understand it in that context, and direct, all of your, or the majority of your risk management efforts towards helping achieve an objective successfully. Mm-hmm. The other angle to it is, which I've always found very helpful, especially when dealing with business people. You're trying to counsel a way through a difficult situation which involves taking decisions. All of business involves taking decisions. It involves taking risk. Is that a really good risk management framework can actually help speed up decision making, because if you know what your board of directors thinks about a certain type of risk, what's their risk appetite towards that, that can be very empowering to individuals around the table to actually get on and manage the business, because you're not left scratching your heads going, are we allowed to do this? Whether or not you're allowed to do it, by virtue of whether or not it's within risk appetite and is in line with, the overall strategy. And so, I think those are the types of considerations which are key to, to understanding risk, and hopefully making it less of a dullards exercise and something that's, hopefully, much more interesting and worthwhile for the business.
Thank you. And if we look at maybe recruiting for in-house roles, mm-hmm. and particularly, skill set, what other qualities do you feel are also equally important?
Yeah. I mean, there are some roles undoubtedly, especially in bigger teams, where you might want, as I said, a specialized skill set to, crack a particular nut on behalf of the business. But, beyond that, what I always look for is, really intelligent people with great training, people who demonstrate, the interpersonal skills that show that they would be capable of really good collaboration within a business, because ultimately, a lot of the time spent in-house is spent collaborating with others, trying to figure out the ways to achieve an objective successfully, maybe enhancing value or, taking less risk. And so, if you combine those, intellect, great training, interpersonal skills, ability to collaborate, and then finally personal motivation, so you can understand that somebody's actually going to be, this fits for them, this is going to make sense in their career. I think that's a really important consideration as well, because then they're going to apply those other skills and, and do it to the best of their abilities. In general, I've not been that interested or focused on recruiting people who've worked in the same sector before, the same industry before. And, I generally believe that given, 6 to 12 months, people will be able to pick almost anything up as long as they've got the right intellect, the interpersonal skills and the motivations to do so.
And do you think, looking at, recruiting now and the legal sector and bringing people in-house, do you feel there would be any changes that lawyers would need to maybe make that would keep them relevant for the future?
Really interesting question. I mean, you see in more and more adverts, for example, for legal roles now, experience in IT, software, technology, digital, privacy. To some extent, these are particular skill sets that just reflect the way that the world is going and where the boom industries are at the moment, and the types of challenges that businesses need to overcome on a daily basis. So to some extent, having some of those skill sets in your locker, I think, is going to be really important over the course of the next, or currently, but the next 5, 10, 20 years, even more so. Another thing that I was thinking about, and kind of, trading a little bit off the title of the interview, the rise of the modern GC, another skill that I think is actually going to be really important is, lawyers figuring out how to articulate how they are adding value within a business as well. What I mean by that is, it's probably not just possible to give legal advice or to sit within a legal team these days and expect that to be valued by your colleagues and to be rewarded with, year-on-year budget increases and, the salaries and bonuses and everything that you expect. Look, I mean, in a crisis, everyone needs a lawyer, and, you realize then and how much you need them. But in more kind of business as usual scenarios, sometimes lawyers can struggle to articulate exactly what it is they are doing that is bringing and adding something to the business. I mean, everybody realizes and understands that when they're not there, a business falls down. It's as essential as a plumbing. But at the same time, lawyers are not as neat and as precise as being able to articulate their value add, and just like you can a sales key performance indicator, or technology downtime. How much of your computer has been online this month, for example. It's much harder to kind of articulate the day in, day out protection of assets and reputation, enhancing value of assets, creating valuable options, anticipating strategy, being proactive about compliance management. These are things which are much harder to articulate in nice little sound bites, but are actually incredibly important to the value of many modern day businesses. So I think, anybody who can think about that and start to articulate that and hopefully bring that to their colleagues is going to stand a very good chance of progressing their careers, but enhancing the reputation of their team overall as well.
Great. And is there anything in particular that, looking back and looking at your in-house career and the experience that you've had, is there any, any additional information or parting message that you'd like to leave with people watching the video today?
Gosh, difficult. I think, be open-minded and be prepared to take a few risks. And try and find good people to work with and follow your gut a little bit in that respect.
That's great. Thank you. If anybody has any questions for either myself or Mark, please don't hesitate to get in touch. You can do that at donna.rosenberg@jamisonlegal.com. A little bit more about Jamieson Legal. We're an international recruitment company, and we recruit for law firms, professional services, industry and commerce. We have offices in London, Abu Dhabi, Hong Kong and Singapore. Thanks for joining us today, Mark, and thanks for all of your insight and information, and particularly for supporting Jamieson Legal and participating in these interviews. It's been great to get to know you and collaborate with you on this.
That was good fun, and thanks for your time. I really appreciate the invitation again. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll look forward to staying in touch, and all the best.
Absolutely. Same to you.
Thanks, Mark.
Bye.